Today we are going to learn the eclipses. There are two types of eclipse, the solar eclipse and lunar eclipse, but first, do you know what is eclipses? An eclipse occurs when astronomical objects are temporarily obscured. Sometimes the Earth is placed between the Sun and the Moon, and other times the Moon is situated between the Earth and the Sun. These are eclipses. But let's investigate better. The lunar eclipse is when the Earth situated between the Moon and the Sun, making the blowout the sunrise, which would be shining moon waiting a shadow, and the darkening it. This phenomenon allows us to see the Moon in the reddish color, almost as it is bleeding. Lunar eclipses are quite frequent and can be seen any pattern beyond at night time. They last for hours and can be seen different types. That the most preconizes are the partial lunar eclipse and the total lunar eclipses. When there's no eclipse it looks like a vital moon, and it's a partial lunar eclipse, and when there's no eclipses and one can see the whole moon, it is total lunar eclipses. Easy, don't you think? To observe the lunar eclipse one does it need special and no more telescope by nucleus by do. Solar eclipse only go when is the new moon, and it's seen when the moon between Earth and the Sun. The moon hides all the sunlight. How exactly does the solar eclipse happen? Why does the Sun sometimes partially or even completely disappear from the sky for a few? Let's start for the basic. Earth, our home planet, is locked in an elliptical path around the Sun. Elliptical path is known as the orbit and completes one revolution in approximately 365 days and 6 weekly, since it takes the same amount of time every year to complete one revolution around the Sun. Earth will be exact same spot every year. Just as Earth moves around the Sun in elliptical orbit every year, our natural the Moon also revolves around the Earth. It takes about 27.32 today for the Moon to complete one revolution around our planet. So, Earth revolves around the Earth. Due to all interrelated motion happening between the three celestial bodies, several physical phenomena occur. When during its evolution around the Earth, moves between the Sun and the Earth, blocks out the Sun rays, which cast a shadow on parts of this is called the eclipse of the Sun or solar eclipse. In other words, a solar eclipse happens when the Moon passes in a direct line. Now you may think that the Moon is infinitesimally small compared to the Sun, so why it is ever able to occur part of or sometimes even the entire Sun? Although the Moon is ended about 40 times smaller than the Sun, this is why both the Moon and the Sun appear to be the same size in our sky. The Moon is very small compared to the Sun and the Earth, which is why the Moon's shadow isn't big enough to engulf our entire planet. Therefore, the Moon's shadow is always limited to a certain area. This area changes even during an eclipse, as both the celestial bodies are in constant motion with respect to one. Therefore, the Moon's shadow is always limited to a certain area. This area changes even. The second type of shadow is known as the penumbra. It is a larger and relatively lighter shadow than the umbra. Depending on the type of shadow the Moon casts on Earth, solar eclipses are body classified into 4 types. The first is a total solar eclipse. The entire is some completely blocked out by the Moon is near perigee, the point of Moon's about when it's close to the Earth. You can only see the total lunar eclipse if you're standing within the umbral shadow. Since the Earth keeps rotating, the umbral shadow does its day at one point of Earth, keeps moving to the imaginary line created. The umbral is known as the path of totality. If any of the places through which of imaginary lines passes, you can see when the sun's completely black out by the moon. Next up is a partial solar eclipse. This type of eclipse is observed when the moon covers only a part of the sun and casts a penumbra. Since it's only cover a part of the sun, this phenomenon is known as a partial solar eclipse. When the moon passes through the center of the sun, but the disk isn't big enough to cover the entire disk of the sun, then the annular solar eclipse occurs. When this happens, the sun's outer edges remain visible, making it look like unlike a total lunar eclipse. During annular eclipse, the moon doesn't completely block out the sun. The four types of eclipse are the rarest of all when the moon's position between the sun and the earth is so delicately balanced that the earth curvature plays of the rule call it a hybrid solar eclipse. During these types of eclipse, some parts of the earth witness as an annular solar eclipse, while other parts see a total lunar eclipse. For those reasons, this type of eclipse is also known as annular total solar eclipse. Since the moon continually revolves around the earth, it's only natural that it sometimes comes between the sun and the earth, while at other times it goes behind the earth, so that the earth comes between the moon and the sun. When the latter happens, we see the lunar eclipse. The moon completes a revolution 7 days around and rotates at the same rates as it revolves around the earth. However, since the earth rotates on its axis and moves in its own orbit around the sun, from our perspective, the moons appear to orbit us every 29 days. Both cast two types of shadow on the moon, umbra and penumbra, when it is oriented between the sun and the moon. Lunar eclipse will be divided into three types of, the first being a total lunar eclipse. The most picturesque and dramatic of all, a total lunar eclipse happens when the moon, earth and the sun are perfectly aligned so that the moons fall under the umbral shadow of our planet. During a total eclipse, earth completely any sunlight dram reaching the moon. Due to this, the moon loses its characteristics whitish-gray color and becomes a sunset red. This happens due to the refraction from the Earth atmosphere. The shorter, blue wavelength of sunlight are scattered outward by the atmosphere, while the longer red wavelength is refracted inward toward the moon, going it reddish tinge during a total lunar eclipse. Next, a partial lunar eclipse, which happens when the moon, earth and the sun align in such a way that only part of the moon passes through the umbral shadow cast by the earth. During a partial eclipse, you can see Earth's shadow covering small part of the moon's surface. Then there's penumbral lunar eclipse. As the name suggests, you can see this type of eclipse when the moon passes through Earth's penumbral shadow. This celestial event is too subtle that many of us don't even notice it visually, as it appears only slightly darker than the usual hue. So, unless you are actively looking to observe the penumbral eclipse, it can be very easily to miss. You can watch a lunar eclipse if you're in the nighttime side of Earth, and for those who wondering, it's safe to watch a lunar eclipse when the naked eye. In contrast, it's dangerous to see naked eye. Observing the solar eclipse without appropriate precautions can potentially cause permanent eye injuries. The light from the sun that reaches the earth consists of a broad range of radiation, form ultraviolet radiation at wavelength longer than 290 nanometers all the way to the radio waves existing in the meter range. The tissues in our eye transmit a considerable portion of this radiation to the back of the eye, the light-sensitive retina. This can result damage to the light-sensitive rod and cone cells in the eye. Basically, make sure that you're wearing appropriate eye gear when you observe this spectacular cosmic phenomenon.